Is it cooler to live on the water? I personally think it is.
Moving forward with the Dekker Team. Moving forward together with the Dekker Team.
The Dekker Team has been helping families for over 30 years. Helping families build their faith, helping families build their relationships, helping families build their wealth. And also helping families make their home from a house. Turning a house into a home.
Now, you think people that live on the water or the water's edge are cooler.
Yeah, they're cool people. Like Surfer Dude, man.
That's why we've ended up living on the water, except as we know from earlier, it's a creek, you call it.
Yeah, Mud Creek.
Okay. And yet the advantages of living on the water, that whole concept of being cooler, we talked in a previous part about the moderating effects, which is really helpful.
Yes.
And compared to the city, you get a lot more green space on the water.
Yeah, and not always. Like there are city waterfront properties that are fairly tight together.
There are.
But again, you've got that space in the back. It feels more spacious. If you're going to come out slightly out of the city, get out of the water and sewer area so that they're on well and septic, now you're going to be a third, half an acre. You're going to have a larger waterfront. You're going to have more space, more trees. It's just going to be a cooler place to live for cool
That's
people.
why you think they're cool.
Yeah, cool people live in a cooler space.
And then the other thing you've often talked about is your childhood.
Yeah. Doesn't everybody talk about their childhood?
Okay, but specifically in relation to waterfront. I think most people do this. Well, some people don't want to think or talk about their childhood.
Yes. Now, actually, I grew up till age 7 in Toronto. And believe it or not, our house was very close to Etobicoke Creek, which was a fairly big creek. And we used to go down there and walk on the rocks and whatever and see the water. Now, then at 7, we moved to Port Severn. Interesting that it's 7 and Severn, isn't it?
Sure.
Now, for those that don't know where Port Severn is, it's right at the last locks of the Trent Severn system that dumps into Georgian Bay, where the group of 7 painted pictures.
Well done.
Thank you.
That's his history from when he was a kid.
No, did you like all the Severns in there?
I did.
Okay.
I thought that was very clever.
Yes. Because it wasn't a group of 6. It was a group of 7. Any rate, I grew up there until I was 17 when I moved away. But it was so enjoyable.
And met me.
Yes, I met you at 17. See, 7's is a great number. I grew up there. And although I worked, because it was a resort, and I would cut grass or make up rooms or serve in the dining room and do all that kind of stuff, my afternoons were pretty much free. So I had the lifestyle of living at a lake house during the day. And I could go fishing, I could go skiing, I could go tubing. I remember we had a little raft, and it was before tubes were really good and they had the canvas around them and that. I had a 2-man raft and we'd sit in it and pull it behind the boat until the bottom ripped right out of it. Then we had a tube.
Nice. So the neat thing about that, really back to the purpose of talking about your childhood, is that it gives people an opportunity to keep their kids really at home, and it becomes an entertainment place. Yeah. It means you're spending a lot less money as the adults in the situation, taking your kids places because you already have a recreation center extravagance right there at
And their
home.
friends will want to come to them, and then you can keep an eye on your children instead of just letting them go somewhere else.
And that's cool too.
Which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that lifestyle, that's what draws me back to water. It's because if you've ever lived on water, very difficult to move away from it. And to, so yeah, it's just emotional for me to think about how nice that is.
He's tearing up. If you're listening to the show instead of watching, you might want to go watch it because he's tearing up just thinking about his childhood on the water.
You know what that means? We might be moving soon. Because
This is
what?
not
All
the time to break
decisions
it to
are
me.
based on emotion.
And there's lots of emotion here. So if you're thinking, wow, I grew up on the water and I have that same feeling that comes over me when I think about the waterfront. And I just kind of think, is this the time? Is this the time that I want to consider it? Is this the time where I'm ready to get to the water? Because as we've said in earlier parts, they're making a little bit more of it, but they're certainly not making water on the big pieces of lake and the beautiful pieces of river and where you can truly have a big boat and enjoy the big boats and that kind of thing.
So having someone to find you the right waterfront property is very important. There's so many things to consider. It's not, a city realtor may have the experience and they may not. Understanding that you've got well and septic to deal with typically, you've got shorefront to worry about, whether you actually own it or not. Can you put a dock on it? It may look great, spring pictures, the water looks great, but what's it look like in August? Is it full of algae and lily pads and it really looks like a swamp and mosquito infested? Or does it stay clear? Is the water moving? Is it a big, do I have the depth for the boat I may want to buy in the future? All of those things are so important. And to have an experienced realtor help you navigate, that's a waterfront saying, I'm on fire today.
You are with sevens and navigation.
Help you navigate the process of finding the right waterfront for you. It's very important.
It really is. And there may be questions that you're asking yourself that Ken hasn't brought up. If you're thinking, well, there's more questions I've got. Well, you can send them in and we'll answer them on a future episode, or you can just call us for a consult and we'll answer your specific questions. Because the waterfront, probably the biggest thing I hear people say, and maybe you've said it to yourself, I would love waterfront. I really would love waterfront. And it's just too expensive. That's probably the thing I hear more than anything for somebody that's anxious to either get back to the waterfront or get to the water for the first time.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily.
Well, not necessarily. And it could be. Typically, you're going to pay, $50,000 or $100,000 more.
Depending on where it is, because it could be $500,000 more.
Yeah. For the same property that's on the water as opposed to not on the water. And is that affordable to you? And I look at it as money in the bank. Because if I pay $50,000 or $100,000 or $200,000 more for a property,
or 3 or 4,
or 3, and I don't have to buy a cottage because now I have my lakefront property, that's money in the bank. Because when I move, it's still going to be worth that and more.
Right. And I don't have capital gains because it's my principal residence.
Exactly.
So that's another really neat advantage in choosing one property rather than 2.
Yeah, exactly. So I just love this topic. So call me, 613-860-4663 if you want to talk waterfront property.
If you want to talk to Ken Dekker about waterfront, you just got his number. He's going to absolutely love it.
And we're excited to be your partners in moving forward because together we've got this.
Moving forward with the Dekker Team. Moving forward together with the Dekker Team.